Richard, welcome to Mint, my friend. Thank you for being on. How are you doing?
Doing really well. Thanks for having me, Adam.
You got it. You got it. Exciting time to be alive. Part of season 4. You guys are spearheading a lot of the creator initiatives happening in Web3. So, really thrilled to have you on and kind of talk more about Manifold. But before we get started on what Manifold is, who you are, I think a good place to start is how'd you get your start in crypto? Okay. Give me a little bit of a background on yourself and then your entryway into crypto, and we'll take it from there and we'll keep going.
Yeah, I got into crypto maybe about like 10 years ago, right? It was this thing that people were talking around when I was working in San Francisco, and it's a little bit of an oddity. But one of my friends convinced me to go to the Bitcoin conference, and I ended up going to this Bitcoin conference, knowing nothing about Bitcoin at all. And I had bought my first Bitcoin, a week before, went to this conference, and just saw the energy that a lot of developers had in the space, right? And this is early 2012s, before like finance had really taken grip of what crypto really was. And it was really just like the hacker mentality of like, here's the cool technology that we all were able to play with. And coming from the startup world, creating applications that had anything to do with transactions of the financial nature was really hard. You have to go through intermediaries, you have to have banks. It was just really hard. But with Bitcoin, as a programmer, you could transfer money from A to B without anyone kind of being in the middle of that. And so it really just enabled this like really kind of interesting wave of innovation for programmers to like really create cool financial applications. And so, I started looking at Bitcoin, and then ended up kind of being a programmer in the space and just creating a bunch of Bitcoin apps. And yeah, from there went on. Eventually, Bitcoin ended up turning into crypto, and crypto turned into NFTs, and then that's how we're at now.
Yeah. So you got your started building on Bitcoin. That's how you got
Yeah,
started, right? And
yeah.
you said what year was that?
2012.
2012.
Yeah,
Oh, geez. So you've been in the space since 2012, actively building it.
yeah.
Wow. So how'd you make your transition from Bitcoin onto Ethereum? Very usually it's like either or. That's like typically the sentiment. So how'd you make your
Mhm.
transition comfortably?
Well, when I started, Ethereum wasn't even a thing, right?
Right.
I was actually there around the Ethereum ICO, right? And I actually didn't buy into the ICO because I was like, "What is this?" It just makes any sense to me. But I kind of regret that now, because I had the opportunity. I was there. I was literally
Right.
on site looking like, "Oh, should I buy into this thing?" Right? But I never did. Um, but Ethereum ended up becoming the kind of like the big secondary chain, or a secondary network. Anyway, it couldn't be avoided at that point, right? And so I actually did a few kind of like smart contract work, before the whole ICO craze, and just playing around with things. But I largely panned it until NFTs came along, right? And when NFTs came along, uh, I was like, okay, this is like crypto's killer application, right? Because to be honest, there was a point after the whole ICO phase where I just kind of dropped off the crypto, because I just didn't believe in what it was doing anymore.
Okay.
Maybe not didn't believe in it, but the applications I was working on just became really boring. It was just moving money back and forth, right? Just looking for new schemes, new different ways of moving, funds from A to B, right? And the technology really just like wasn't exciting from that perspective,
Got
right?
it. Got it. So then
And
so
yeah,
then but wait, so you were building financial applications because the financial side of crypto is very different than the creator side of crypto.
yeah,
It's very black and white in my opinion. I think
mhm,
there's a lot more culture, a lot more class, a lot more fun and magic that happens on the creative side of crypto versus more of the DeFi traditional financial side of crypto. So what was that like, that aha moment for you to make that transition versus building like traditional, like I guess decentralized financial products to now building products for creators and empowering creators?
yeah. Well, it goes back to when I first discovered what an NFT was, right?
Okay.
And so it's actually funny, because I learned what an NFT was right after CryptoPunks came out. One of my friends was like, "Hey, he's actually the creator of CryptoKitties, which was the creator of the ERC-71."
Yeah.
So he told me about this project called CryptoPunks, and I was like, "What is this?" Right? And he's like, "I want to make a project like CryptoPunks, but with cats on the blockchain." And I was like, "This is stupid," right? Because I had no idea if anything was going on, right? And I told him that, but he went ahead and did it anyways. And then now we have CryptoKitties, ER71. So it's funny how that all kind of came full circle to me. Um, but for a while there, like I said, I got bored of just doing financial applications, because there was no actual creativity involved with it, right? It was
Hmm.
more like, how do you move money from A to B?
Right.
And I actually left and did another startup in between there, which is not even related to crypto at all. It was like a Uber for babysitting. But it didn't work out, and I ended up going back to crypto just to working a few projects with a few of my friends.
Hmm.
But when I discovered what an NFT was, right, at first it made no sense to me, because they were, my co-founder Eric is the one who sent me the first NFT I ever kind of like looked at. And he bought this NFT off NFT Degen for $1,000. And I was like, what did you buy? Right. And it was just like, right? Just like, what did you buy? Right. I'm like, he bought this image, but what did you actually buy? Right? No, this is my very first like impression of this, right? And it wasn't until he actually got me to buy one with him that it made sense, right? Because after I bought one, right, I had this emotional connection to this asset that we ended up selling. It was a Slam Sunday piece he bought from the Gateway for like $4,000, and we flipped it an hour later for like $11,000 or $15,000. And so this is my first 20 minutes in NFTs, by the way.
Wow.
Right. And just this crazy roller coaster ride of like what just happened here. Right.
Wow. What NFT was that on NFT Gateway?
Yeah. So the NFT was, it was a Slime Sunday piece. It was called Like Machine Part 2.
Okay.
And yeah, so the whole story is I bought this NFT for $4,000. It was a 101. And my very, very first NFT, right? And after I bought it, I asked Eric, what do you do this thing? He's like, well, you can do three things. You can hold it, you can sell it, or you can transfer it, right? And he's like, selling is probably the most interesting thing. And I have no idea how much these things cost. I don't even know why. I bought it for $4,000, but he told me to. And so I had no idea how to price these things, right? And so we sold it. He's like, put it for $15,000, right? And I was like, who's gonna buy it for $15,000? That's like ridiculous. So we ended up selling it. We ended up, like, after we hung up the call, about 10 minutes later, I got an email notification said that it had sold. And I was just like, what just happened here, right? And it was funny because my emotional response wasn't like happy, right? I just made $11,000 for like, 20 minutes worth of whatever work, work. And I was like, my first response was like, oh no, I sold it too low if someone bought it that fast, right? And then my second response was, I didn't have this thing anymore, right? It was just like, it's this interesting thing where I had this, like, this thing wasn't in my life an hour ago. I had it for an hour and it was gone, right? Yeah. But I had developed an attachment to it, an emotional attachment to it, that was like very interesting for me to have that kind of attachment to, like, a digital object, a digital good. And from there, I was like, that aha moment just like clicked in me. It was like, well, it's all about ownership of digital assets, right? And this has never been done before, on this level, right? And art just made so much sense, right? And because of that kind of moment there, I was like, okay, this makes sense. This to me was the application of crypto that everyone in the crypto community was looking for to really bring crypto mainstream. And so from there, it was like, okay, I just dove right into like what NFTs were, the technology behind it, and frankly started off as a collector at first and trying to understand the space. And at first I started off as a collector just to like repeat what I had done and kind of collect things, because there was value there. But as we started collecting kind of more and more works and getting to artists, we realized that a lot of these artists didn't actually understand the technology that they were, building their like building off of. Right. For them, creating NFTs was strictly creating artwork and attaching it to a token, and then having some other platform sell that token on their behalf. But from my perspective, the blockchain and NFTs is a brand new medium that could be explored. That when you combine artwork and technology, it creates, brand new ecosystems and brand new means of expression that can then be kind of packaged and created for, distribution in a consumable fashion, right? So it became more of a consumer app rather than a financial app from my perspective.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Why do you think NFTs took crypto mainstream more than, I guess, buying and selling traditional assets on an exchange or investing for the most part?
So this is the whole idea is because, when people are buying tokens, right? Tokens are very abstract. The idea of a token is it's extremely abstract, right? And the value proposition of a token is strictly value. Right? And so when you buy stock, when you buy stock, it's like, okay, you want the value of the stock to go up based on the company's activities, right? Same thing with a token, right? You have no kind of connection to the token itself, right? Especially in crypto, because a lot of these tokens are just like purely abstract tokens. And so, when I was like dealing with like more like, token-based, like systems, it's strictly how do I move money back and forth. I had no connection to the money itself, the value of these tokens itself, right? But now with an NFT, you all of a sudden you have, a lot of interesting psychological effects of, one, having a connection to the creator of the token itself, two, having connections to the ecosystem of, other collectors that, you have this shared camaraderie with. And on top of that too, you have, a really cool piece of artwork, or like media that is tangible, right? You can actually look at it. You can actually like keep it in your head, right? You have, when I think about, certain NFTs, I actually like imagine what it is in my head, right? Because you have that
Right.
visual representation of it.
Right.
Whereas if you have a token, you're like, what does this token represent?
Right.
It's literally just, it's a piece of data that has an abstract representation.
Yeah.
So, I think for creating an emotional connection to what these are doing, right, and being kind of relevant in consumers, and collectors' heads, is that tangible thing of having that media attached to it really creates that connection to, these communities and what NFTs are in general.
Yeah. So in incoming Manifold came into the picture
Yep.
having this realization that creators don't own the contracts that they issue their projects on. And I remember explicitly Manifold came on my radar around projects like Fuck Render, around projects like Mad Dog Jones, really iconic pieces that made like set the narrative and tone for what NFT drops would look and feel like, what experimentation would look and feel like. And it very much came from Manifold's wheelhouse. So talk to me more about like the inspiration behind starting Manifold. Okay, it's to create creator sovereignty. That's your mission, right? That's what you guys are after.
Yep.
But what does that really mean in the grand scheme of things?
Yeah. So, like I mentioned before, a lot of these artists didn't actually understand the technology behind,
Right.
what NFTs were. And they would rely on different platforms to kind of
Hmm.
provide that technology and that kind of vision for, what this token infrastructure might look like. At QN, when we first started working with Mad Dog Jones, our big flagship project that really was the start of Manifold was the Replicator. And with Replicator, we really wanted to show that, NFTs could be so much more than just what everyone thought NFTs were. And so, the Replicator it's a conceptual art piece that can only be expressed as an NFT itself, right? So there's no other medium that you could create the Replicator in, compared to some other, compared to some other artworks where the NFT medium is just the image itself. But in the Replicator, the contract actually plays a very important role in running the conceptual art experience of what the Replicator is. And we launched Replicator, and then we realized that this was probably one of the very first times that a sovereign contract had such a valuable artwork attached to it, right? And we ended up selling the Replicator for $4.2 million at Phillips, and it was a complete standalone smart contract for this
Crazy.
experience itself, right? And that was really kind of like this like aha moment of, well, why don't creators really have their own smart contracts? And when you look at the ecosystem right there, a lot of these creators, they had to go through these platforms. Right? At the time, in order to get a drop on like Nifty Gateway, you had to apply to Nifty Gateway, and they had this huge backlog of people
Right.
people wanted to go get dropped, right? And really, creators were really beholden to platforms at the time. The other side of things is, you have share contracts, right? But the same sort of deal is on these share contracts is that it's the platform who owns the implementation of these contracts, who owns the token and kind of controls the distribution of the contract, right?
Sure.
And the whole idea behind, Web3 crypto was that, you should be able to realize self-sovereignty. And for NFTs, what that means to us is creative sovereignty. And so we thought it was crazy that these creators didn't actually own any of the technology that they were selling their NFTs on. And so, we said, we have, working Replicator, we now had this like base idea for what creative sovereign contracts should look like. And then we ended up creating the Manifold Creator Contract to allow each creator to have their own self-sovereign contract to mint. A few things about that is, one, it increases the provenance of the piece itself, right? Because now, in order to verify authenticity of a piece on the shared contract, you actually have to go to that property, that web property, to verify that
Right.
that piece was created
Right.
on that platform. You have to verify that that piece wasn't, a fake on that platform itself too, right? And it was really reliant on this external system to verify authenticity of a piece, right? Like for example, like say Nifty Gateway would just disappear off the face of the earth, right? What
Okay.
reference would you have to these tokens that says that this is an authentic Nifty Gateway token? Right?
Got it.
Right. And so, our whole concept was that the contract was the root of all kind of creator output. And then that could be used to trace verification and maximize provenance for NFTs itself.
So beyond tracing verification, beyond maximizing provenance, is there anything that like any other benefit that comes with a self-sovereign contract that you could do from like an experience play, that you can do from a composability play, that you can do, I guess, from a more experimentative play that you otherwise wouldn't have been able to do if you were launching your product or your project on a non-creator owned contract. Can you walk
Yeah.
me more through that? And I asked that from a very like dumbed down point of view, just to kind of introduce how you're thinking about this stuff internally.
Yeah. So one of the big things is that a standard NFT minting contract is just that. It just literally just takes an image or a link to an image and mints it as an NFT.
Right.
But as I was mentioning earlier, there's so much more you can do to NFTs if you consider kind of the smart contract as part of the NFT. So one unique thing that Manifold does is that we have our contract is called the Manifold Creator Contract. And one kind of like defining feature of it is that we have the ability to install what we call extensions onto that contract itself. And what that does, it creates an application like interface to the smart contract that another contract can then hook into to run different kind of business logic and programmatic interfaces to that original smart contract to create new experiences, like new NFT experiences. On top of that too, it also enables like very cool mechanics from how these contracts can hook into a bigger ecosystem and be more composable, for the creators at large. And so an example of this is that if I had an NFT contract, just a standard NFT contract, every time I wanted to kind of do something new, I would have to deploy a new contract with that kind of logic built into it. With our contracts, what you do is you have one base contract that does all your minting. Then you can deploy another contract that hooks into it that will let you do some things like sell your NFTs on a website. We have an extension that lets Nifty Gateway mint on these contracts, so you can literally sell on Nifty Gateway and have it be minted from your own sovereign contract.
Cool.
We have other things to do with like royalties, right? You can hook into customize royalties from that perspective. And the thing is that you can create really interesting mechanics once you start kind of creating like multi-system or like multi-contract systems. Whereas the state of NFTs right now is everything is kind of singular contract where they take the base functionality, encode all the functionality into it, and then that's it.
Yeah. Is the bet at Manifold that more and more creators will become more technically native and they'll understand the underlying infrastructure as to what happens behind their projects? Is the bet more to make it as like no code and seamless as possible so that anybody can come and plug and play? I'm just trying to think about it from like the mainstream creator economy crowd. It's like a lot of creative entrepreneurs, bloggers, journalists, video content creators, musicians, etc. And while I believe that the word creator, it's a very general word, and almost anything can fit into that category. I'm trying to understand. So how do you guys think about it? Is it the bet that more creators will become more technically native? Is it more of a no code play? How are you thinking about it?
It's a bit both, right?
Okay.
And so if you just take Manifold Studio directly, Manifold Studio is designed so that you don't have to understand the technology to kind of do what you want to do in the Web3 and NFT ecosystem, right? But that being said, though, all of our technology is on the contract level is open source, right? And it's open, right? And so as a creator, you own the contract itself, and so if you want to go deeper into the technology, you're allowed to do that,
right?
And our goal is to create tools and infrastructure for developers and creators to kind of push the bounds of what NFTs can be. But I think the whole vision here is that as a creator, you shouldn't be beholden to any sort of middleman platform or external body unless they actually are providing value to you. And so we want to give creators the choice of who they partner with and what platforms they want to work with if they are actually truly providing value to the creators themselves.
Yeah.
And so I've heard from lots of creators that they've worked on different platforms and said at the end of the day these platforms are taking like huge fees from them, but not actually providing any value, right? And so that case,
shout out Web2 platforms.
Yeah, right. And so in that case, it should really just be the creator is the one doing all the hard work, right? And so they should be paid for their hard work, right, and not have to be have all these like fees taken away from them.
Yeah.
Our whole goal is to enable self-sovereignty, right? And self-sovereignty means full control of creators to choose, their own destinies.
Yeah. What's up, guys? Adam Levy here. Sorry for the quick pause. I wanted to give some love to our two NFT sponsors that are making this episode a reality. They are Coinvise and Polygon Studios. On Coinvise, you can create a personal or community-owned social token on Ethereum or Polygon. Coinvise also helps you create incentives through token rewards and bounties, NFT business models, and bot integrations for Discord. Discover more today by visiting coinvise.co. Polygon Studios is the gaming and NFT arm of Polygon, who's focused on growing the blockchain gaming and NFT industry while bridging the gap between Web 2 and Web 3 gaming. The Polygon Studios ecosystem comprises highly loved blockchain games like OpenSea, Upshot, Avagachi, Zedrun, Skyweaver, Decentraland, and Decentral Games. If you're a gamer, builder, or NFT creator looking to join the Polygon Studios ecosystem, get started today by visiting polygonstudios.com. All right, back to the episode. Makes sense. I want to get your point of view, Richard. What do you think is a creator class that has yet to experience the full potential and benefit of Web3? We see photographers, we've seen like journalists through Mirror, right? We've seen musicians. We see, of course, digital artists and artists in general. What is a creator class do you think that's yet to be kind of like impacted by the primitives of Web3?
I would say more like, the thing that I'm thinking right now is more like book publishing and authors, right? Because, they're very similar model, right? So how authors usually work is you get an advance for your work, right?
Mm-hmm.
After that, you get a distribution. Once you finish your work, you have to pay back that advance, and then, it's up to the publisher now to kind of do the distribution and promotion. But they take a huge cut of pretty much every single like sale, right? I heard that for most publishers or authors, right, they're only making like 20% of for every dollar, for every even less than that in some cases, right? And so obviously, there's a big inversion that's possible here, where the funds can actually go towards the creators themselves rather than all the middlemen, the publishers, and the agents, and so on. So that's one thing. Music is an obvious thing, right?
Right.
I think a lot of the music industry is very like rooted in tradition, right? And they haven't actually adapted to the new age of what does distribution look like on the internet. Yeah. And I think Web3 is kind of like, again, inverting that power, the power of creators. Yeah. Right.
I had the two-time Grammy Award-winning producer Illmind on Mint alongside. I think we published this episode today, and one thing that we talked about, speaking about like the industry of like the music industry and its tradition, is he creates beats, loops. He's a producer, and the way kind of like beat artists, loop artists, stem artists, they share beats with one another is by uploading the file to Google Drive and then sending that to the individual that they want potentially using it. And all the terms and agreements are very like scattered. They're like in the email itself. There's no real standardization behind it. A lot of people get screwed in the end. And it got me thinking, like, how can Web3 solve that? How can blockchain primitives solve that? The ownership layer, the verification layer, and being able to build, if you buy a beat or a loop on chain, being able to build on that song in verifying ownership from the molecular level as it kind of trickles down all the way to the foundation of what the song is, a beat, a drum track, etc. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Like, what is your point of view on the entire cycle right now of what's happening with music NFTs right now? How do you kind of like make sense of it? Why don't you think it's had as much success as like NFTs did during the Nifty Gateway era, for example, when we have platforms like Sound.xyz kind of replicating the edition model, and platforms like Catalog replicating the super rare model, for example? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think for one thing is like, what does it mean to own a song, right? Like, what is the actual ownership of a song kind of get you, right? And if we think about kind of consumption of music right now, consumption of music is pretty much free, because you have platforms like Spotify, Apple Music, who pretty much give you unlimited access to songs, right? And so ownership of a song is just a completely very different kind of mental model for people to like think about, right? And with the art market, we have a good mental model, which is the traditional art market, like physical art market, that we can replicate off of. But for music, that it's a very disjoint between what does ownership of the song mean, what does royalties for a song mean, right? And how does I, as a owner of media, really benefit from owning a song?
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. One thing I want to talk to you about, Richard. So we talked about the Manifold Creator Contract. You guys recently released the Collector Stats, which I thought was a super interesting tool for a lot of creators, because many times they have a bunch of collectors and they don't know anything about them. It's just an anonymous address. But the blockchain is rich with data, For example, I did this campaign, I guess this drop with this independent music artist. Her name is Queen George. We sold NFT tickets to attend her concert. They were free to mint and attend at ETH Denver. Okay.
Mhm.
And she got about like 150 collectors just based off that contract alone, or based off those tickets alone. But these are 150 addresses that she has no idea who they are, what they do. And we were thinking of like, what if there was a way to actually upload like a CSV file, be able to see how many of these people are in FWB in Forefront? How many, what NFTs do they collect? What things or governance proposals have they kind of voted on, etc. And to really
Mhm.
understand on the granular level who her audience is, something that Spotify and Apple Music, let alone many other applications, don't provide that in-depth level analytics, but is free to tap into on the blockchain. How do you think about that as creators kind of build their audiences on chain? What kind of tools, what kind of solutions do they need, and how does the creator, the collector stats kind of empower that?
Yeah, so one of the big things that we work with a lot of creators, right? I've personally worked with hundreds of creators on various projects or different
Yeah.
capacity, and one of the big things is that these creators are all have no idea who their collectors are in most cases, right? In some cases they have very personal relationships with them. In other cases, they're just like these addresses right there. And so we primarily built tools internally for ourselves because we run a lot of campaigns for artists, for them to kind of re-engage with their audiences. And what we're doing with these is just surfacing kind of like who these people are that they're kind of within their network. Then on top of that too is a lot of platforms aren't actually giving proper stats for
Hmm.
these creators, because if you think about a platform, one of the big things is that they're kind of focused on themselves. And so they have stats within their platform, but they don't have like macro stats outside of their platform itself for who your token collectors are. And so we're really trying to enable creators to understand their whole ecosystem of creators or collectors themselves, right? One of the big things about Manifold is that we're very platform agnostic, right? Our contracts are compatible with pretty much every single platform out there. And this is just kind of the next iteration of like how do we provide more value to creators to really understand what is actually happening within their token ecosystems.
Yeah.
On top of that too, another big thing is a lot of these creators have no idea about their sales stats, right? How many tokens have they sold, right? And we're just trying to surface this information so that it's more useful for them, for example, for taxes or reporting.
Yeah, makes sense. Can you talk more about like the level of I guess the intricacy of the data that you can collect and present, and the insights and knowledge that you can kind of capture by analyzing on-chain data? What are some of like the biggest beyond understanding how many tokens you've actually sold, and putting, I guess, more data points behind your collectors? Like what other metrics are important to recognize as a creator when you're building an on-chain audience?
Yeah. So I think the obvious one here is royalties, right?
Okay.
A lot of creators have no idea what the royalties are, right? They
Hmm.
they literally just end up have, in some cases, OpenSea has their own kind of private system for handling royalties. We worked on something called the royalty registry to kind of democratize royalties and make it really easy for other platforms to figure out what royalties are. But that all that data is on chain, right? And it can be kind of filtered down to creators. So that's like one thing. That's like a big on. That's a big thing. That's a big amount of data on chain that can be kind of surfaced. With regarding to collectors, right? A lot of these creators have no idea how much money some certain collectors are actually spending on their tokens,
Right.
right? And so that's another thing, right? So being able to reward their top collectors, their biggest supporters, and really just doing something special for them, right? Myself, I'm always very happy when these creators will reach out to me and say, like, thanks for being one of my early supporters, and I've helped enable their careers and just like got them to where they are, right? And in some cases, they've given me like something special, like a physical print or even an NFT, right, as like a thank you. And a lot of these cases, some of these creators have no idea of just how much some of these collectors have invested into the livelihoods of these artists. So
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Can we pivot into talking about the punk sale and
all right,
the whole PR and fun conversation around that? I had Patricio on the podcast, I think last season, and
yeah.
we he came on around the time where he made the bid, and a lot of the positive controversy online happened. Can you talk more about that? I'd love to hear your story on that.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess here's my story from my perspective of what happened,
Okay.
right? And so I believe it was a Friday, and I was actually doing an engineering interview for an engineering candidate for Manifold. And as I was doing this interview, just pretty much all my notifications just started going nuts, like just completely nuts. My DMs were going off, my Discord was going off, and my Twitter was going off, and my phone was going off, right? And it was like everyone was just trying to get a hold of me, right? And I had no idea why, right? Just like zero idea why, right? I'm in this interview, by the way, too, right? So obviously I'm gonna like take a break and just like go off the side and see what's going on because everything's just blowing up. And so then I'm looking at this, right, and everyone's like, go check Larva Labs, right? Like, is this real? And so I go look and I see that there is a $9.5 million offer for my CryptoPunk. And my first reaction was like, this isn't mine, right? This is not, like this is something, there's something fishy going on here because I had no idea like why someone would do that. Because, I obviously know the value of my punk and it wasn't $9.5 million. But anyway, so I was a little distracted because I was in the interview. So I explained the situation to the interview and like, I'll deal with this later. But then we finished the interview, and then when I actually had time to breathe and like actually look at it, I was like, okay. My first reaction was like, is this a scam, right? If I accept this, am I just gonna get rugged and like front run by Mevbot? But as I was looking into it and actually like looking at what it was, I saw it was from the founder of POAP, Patricio, and I was just like very confused of like like why, right? And as I looked into it, I realized that it was because of a comment I made earlier that said I would never ever sell my punk, right? Because my punk is kind of like tied to me and my identity. And so, my very first thing was like, okay, so what is, after I assessed the situation, it was more like why, like who is this, right? And so, I had talked to Patricio like once before over an email because he was trying to introduce me to somebody, but I had no idea that, his background of, where he came in crypto. And so I realized it was a legit offer. I talked to a few other people and says, no, this is like completely legit. Patricio is 100% serious. He's a little crazy, but he's 100% serious with this offer. And I was left over thinking to myself, like, should I accept this offer? And obviously it's a very, very respectable offer. I guess it's one of the highest offers for a CryptoPunk. So I actually gave it like a lot of consideration. But it was interesting because I was convincing myself of why I should accept it. My default was to reject, and I was trying to figure out, in my head, the reasons for accepting this. And I went through all the scenarios here of like, well, I guess $9.5 million is a big thing, right? Which is to everyone's big thing. But then I thought about, what I said earlier was like, I'd never ever sell this thing, and so it was kind of like really testing my integrity and making me put my money where my mouth is in real time and publicly on the blockchain too, right? Which is like really interesting because, this was there for the whole world to see, right? This wasn't like a private deal where he offered me something, but for that time, that money was in the smart contract of the CryptoPunks, and if I would have just went to the site and clicked accept, it would have been instantly transferred to me, right? But as I thought about it, what it meant, I had built this kind of persona and brand around my CryptoPunk, the 3 glasses, Manifold in general, right? And I became really attached to my punk. It looks just like me. And so, I thought about it for a lot and thought about, at the end of the day, it's not something I wanted to do to accept it because, I just thought of it like, if I accept something, all the memes of people being like, oh,
right.
says he wouldn't sell his punk, offered $10 million, sells his punk instantly, right? And I was like, well, I got a little bit more integrity from that. I respected the offer, but at the end of the day, I was like, no, this is not how I want to be remembered or like to sell my punk, right? And so yeah, I rejected it. And
So
then,
now that you rejected it, what does that say about you now? What does that say to the community? So if you would have accepted it, you would have had those types of memes, excuse me.
yeah.
Now that you rejected it and you've held your stance, you're firm on your integrity. What does that say about you now?
I don't know. I think I'm very, the thing about me, my online persona and my real life persona is that I see myself as exactly the same person.
Okay.
Right? I know a lot of people have very like, pseudonymous identities, but I pretty much act the exact same way online and offline. Right. I've gotten to the point where it's like the money was just not a factor in these decisions anymore. Right. I live very comfortably. I've never been about trying to make a whole ton of money. I have my needs met. Right. And I'm able to really just focus on the things that I really care about. Right. In the NFT space, it's creation, being an entrepreneur and trying to like really build a future. Right. And I think that, one of the big things about Manifold is that the reason why I think we're successful is that each of the founders has that exact same mindset. Like we're not interested in the short-term gains of how can we get rich. We're thinking about how can we build a lasting company that has an impact in society, in the world, and crypto for 5-10 years, right? Like we were thinking really, really long term from that perspective, right? And me and my co-founders, we've all sold our companies before, right? And so money is not the driving factor between all of our actions, right? And I just really wanted to show that, that's part of who I am and what I stand for. And I really think that my reward in the crypto space will come from delivering long-term value to pretty much everyone that we interact with and are able to help.
Yeah, I love your long-term mindset. I feel like if it was almost anybody else, the bid would have been accepted despite the tweets that they surfaced online and how it pertains
Yeah.
to their identity. I really commend you for that. I really applaud you to that because there is a level of I guess bravery that comes with not accepting that offer and realizing that there's more than just money to living a
That's it.
fulfilling life, right? And you've really exemplified that. I'm curious. We didn't really touch upon this. How did you guys meet the co-founders? What's
Uh,
the uprising story behind that?
my co-founders and I we've been friends for like a decade now.
Okay.
It's actually really funny because I used to work at a company in Vancouver,
Okay.
and for like 2 years they tried to recruit me to their company to join as an engineer. But just the timing never worked out. It's actually funny because I have an email thread with one of them
Mhm.
where we play email tag for about 2 years, right? And it's like, hey, we should meet up, right? And then like 3 months later, it's like, oh, sorry, I forgot this email, right? And we should try to meet up again, right? And then we just like ghost each other, and it's just this like really funny thread. But in the Vancouver tech scene, it wasn't really that big at the time, so we became friends. I eventually ended up being my own entrepreneur, right? And then we became close friends. And we never really had an opportunity to work together. And from that perspective, they were building their company. We done some kind of cool, talks about wanting to do a project together. But it wasn't until like NFTs came around and my co-founder Eric really introduced me to it.
Yeah.
And it's really funny because he's like, I noticed as soon as you introduced you to NFT, you just went all in, right? Like it was like before that, before NFTs, I actually wasn't doing anything. I was just like sitting at home playing Zelda all day.
Actually.
I literally was not
Why
working.
do I
Like
find that so hard to believe?
yeah, I had nothing to do, right? So I was
Okay.
kind of I was working on projects, but just not really like really like I guess like driven by the projects,
Okay.
right? And it's really funny because I've been working on this project for like a year, but I know knowing myself, if I was actually motivated to do it, I could have got done the project in a week, right?
Mm.
But this whole project, I've been like just dragging it off, not really like working on it. But then as soon as NFTs came along, I was like, oh my god, I just like
Done.
dropped everything, right? And went back into like full builder mode, right?
Yeah, I love that. What do you think are some of the biggest opportunities that we have yet to see unfold in the next few years in the NFT world, the crypto world? How are you thinking about the space, big picture?
I'm thinking that I think Web3 companies are gonna kind of I would say earth up the kind of Web2 platforms. Like for example, right now, if I think about Web3 business models, in Web3, I have not seen a single ad, or no, I guess traditional ad from your sense of like Google. Software as a service is not is not a predominant business model, right? It's really about ownership, right? And I think that this is going to permeate to like different kind of areas of the companies, right? Because it makes sense because as a participant in these token economies for companies, that I am now able to participate in the growth of the company and the upside of these companies rather than being having to pay into these things or be advertised to for I am the product, right? The big saying in Web2 is that consumers are the product, right? But in Web3, it's the consumers are the owners, right? And they have actually
Yeah.
ownership and control in these things, right? And I think it just makes a lot of sense, from business model innovation for how you can create brand new engaging products. So
My perspective on that is, so yes, we haven't seen like ads on platforms like we do on Google or Facebook or
yeah,
TikTok, whatever. My business model for Mint is I sell ads in the form of NFTs. So depending on which NFT the sponsor buys, determines the level of promotion for the season. All revenue has been on chain since day zero, since the birth of the
yeah,
podcast. And it's interesting because Forbes reported that creators are still like overwhelmingly dependent on advertising revenue They surveyed like 2,000 creators, and they found that 77% of the creators still list brand deals as their highest earning revenue source. So a form of ads. One thing that I've been trying to think about very intimately and deeply is like, how will advertising change on the creator side of things with the introduction of Web3? Is someone like Ali McPherson, who launched an Ali coin, who's a gamer, Twitch gamer, who has a community of people who hold the Ali coin. She hosts gaming tournaments. Will the brands now buy into the token supply of the creator versus her doing ads, like, so that the entire audience wins who's holding the token? Like, how do you kind of imagine brand deals, for example, and the advertising side of brand deals and creators kind of emerging with Web3, with ownership, with all these primitives that are kind of forming?
Yeah. So like, one of the big things is that with the token economy and the blockchain, you actually know who your customers are,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's all on chain, right? And the thing is, you can reward them. Like you can reward them directly through kind of different kind of incentives and token infrastructures. On top of that too, you can provide real world kind of value to these holders themselves, right? It really depends on the brand, right? I think most brands have kind of tangible goods that they sell at the end of the day, right? And so you can imagine that you can turn fans from another economy, another kind of platform, or I guess holders of these tokens into fans of your own tokens, and then you can offer kind of this like cyclic ecosystem where you're better off by combining forces than just being independent.
Got it. Yeah, makes sense. Richard, before I let you go, where can we find you? Any last words? Just take it away.
Oh, yeah. You can find me on Twitter, right? So my username is just @Richard, right? And that's
Cool.
kind of spelled uniquely. It's RICHERD. And then my company is Manifold. You can find us on Twitter also at Manifold at Manifold XYZ. I think the big thing right now is just really focusing on thinking about the longevity of the Web3 space.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're still super, super early in everything we're doing right now, right? Like these systems for NFTs and Web3 and crypto in general are just still very, very archaic, and it's very kind of like in the Stone Ages, even though it's been around for like, over a decade now. We're just getting to the point where, people are thinking about usability and long-term functionality and long-term like thinking in these cases.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think that we're just going to see more and more innovation in the space, as more people come in and understand technology and start building. And so, I'm really excited to, be here at the forefront of, all of the exciting things that people are creating right now. So
Amazing. And we can find Manifold where? At Manifold XYZ
yeah,
on Twitter?
at Manifold XYZ, yep, on Twitter.
Okay, cool. Richard, thank you so much. We'll have to do this again. But until then, have a good one.
Yeah, thanks, Adam.
What's up, guys? If you've gotten this far, then I owe you a listener badge NFT. Go to adamlevy.io/POAP, that's POAP, and click the respective season. Fill out your info, and I'll distribute the free to mint NFT at the end of the season. Also, please make sure to rate and subscribe to the podcast. You won't believe it, but it helps me out a ton. And finally, hit me up on Twitter @LevyChain. I want to hear what you're building, the latest crowdfund you're trying to complete, or if you just simply want to chat. If you couldn't tell already, I love talking about where crypto meets the creator economy, and it's no different if it's coming from you directly. Thank you so much for your support. It means the world, and we'll catch you on the next episode.